On episode 664 of the 40 Plus Fitness Podcast, we answer listeners' questions about intermittent fasting, ketosis, ideal weight, diametrically opposing information from experts, and training for power as we age. You can find the full show notes for this episode at 40plusfitnesspodcast.com/664. Have you decided you're ready to make a change? To reclaim your health and fitness, the 40 Plus Fitness Podcast is here for you. Each week, we dive deep into health and fitness topics that affect those of us over 40. I'm Coach Allen. I'm an NASM certified personal trainer with specializations in corrective exercise, behavior change, performance enhancement, and fitness nutrition. A Precision Nutrition Level 1 coach, a FAI certified functional age-linked specialist, and an OTA Level 2 online trainer. Each week, I'm joined by our co-host, Coach Rachel. She is an NASM certified personal trainer and a RRCA Level 1 run coach. Let us be your coaches as you find your way on your health and fitness journey. All right, let's go. Hey, Raz, how are you?
Good, Alan. How are you today?
I'm doing well. Good. I've had, we had talked, I think last week, we were talking about how Tammy's going to go on her Tata trip to get her mammogram and all that, do some shopping and things like that. And so this is low season. So we're like, okay, this would be a good time to go. Plus we had a large group come in of these veterinarians that are doing these pop-up clinics for spay and neuter. Well, they all got in, they all get checked in. So it's actually easier when we don't have check-ins and check-outs. So if it's just breakfast, it's not too bad. But also among the middle of the week, our staff, one of them's off the whole month for his holidays. And the other one, she doesn't work on Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. She's on a short schedule. So that's 3 mornings that I had to cover breakfast.
Oh boy.
Yeah. So it's like, and this cooked to order. So this isn't like I just put out a pan of, like a buffet or anything. This is made to order. So a little bit of a challenge to get into a kitchen and make all those breakfasts and get them all out and not mix them up and not food poison anybody. So I made it through this morning. They actually didn't have breakfast this morning. So that was kind of cool. But, and so, yeah, tomorrow my staff's there. So I feel like I've made it to the other side.
That's a good thing.
So how are things up there?
Good. It's interesting you mentioned cooking because it's one of the things that I'm trying to change now that I'm an empty nester. I have told everybody, if you know me, I say that I have retired from cooking. I'm done with it. But now I'm starting to develop a different relationship with cooking. And I'd like to learn some new meals, maybe some new techniques, maybe learn how to cook something in a different fashion. So it's piquing my curiosity a little bit. I'm sure I'm not going to be a short order cook like you maybe have been, but I'm interested in looking up some new recipes and just trying something new. It's time for a change in our repertoire. And Mike is always my cook, although he travels a lot. So it's time I am my own cook.
Yeah. I was talking to someone the other day and they took a cooking class and they were just so shocked that just learning the techniques of cooking well, they kind of started to fall in love with it. And they're like, it's one of those things you don't know what you don't know.
Exactly.
But he's like, as soon as he got in there and he started teaching him some of the techniques and everything, and he was learning how the proper ways to season foods and cook foods. And he said he just really now he just enjoys food a whole lot more and he really enjoys cooking. So
nice.
Maybe
that's
take
awesome.
A class,
Yeah, I think that would be super fun. I would enjoy that.
Cool.
Yeah.
All right. Are you ready to answer some listener questions?
Sure.
Okay. So yeah, about it's almost been 2 months, I guess. I sent out a message. I talked to here. I think I said something on here. And then I sent out on Facebook and to the email addresses I had that, we were going to do this Q&A. And I'd love to do a Q&A about once a quarter, but I've tried this in the past and just didn't didn't get any questions. So I'm like, okay, everybody knows what they're doing. I guess they don't need me.
Sure.
But we did get some questions this time. And I want to thank everybody that took the time to send the questions. And if you have questions that you want answered, just message me, coach at 40plusfitness.com. I'll answer your question. We won't have to wait until we do another one of these shows, but I would really like to do one of these about once a quarter. So
cool.
If you've got some questions, just go ahead and send them in. And again, I won't wait for, probably November or so to actually answer your questions. But, again, it's good to know what you want to know so I can make sure this content is most relevant to you and your needs. So thank you for everyone that did submit the questions this time. So we're going to start. Actually, the first two questions are about intermittent fasting or restricted eating windows. So the first one's from Phil. And Phil is just wondering if intermittent fasting is effective, healthy, and sustainable method combined with regular exercise for a long-term weight and fitness maintenance plan. And my short answer is yes, mostly. Okay. You still have to listen to your body, and you still have to make sure that you're getting enough food. So many people will, they think that intermittent fasting is like this gimmick to help them eat less. And so it can be effective at helping you lose weight, particularly body fat. And if you're getting everything that you need and the regular exercise, I know plenty of people that eat on a restricted eating window or intermittent fast. That's just a natural way for them to go through their lives. They wake up in the morning, they're not really hungry. So they go on about their day and they have their first meal in the afternoon. When I'm in ketosis, that's exactly what I'm doing. I seldom have a breakfast. My breakfast, if you will, is happening sometime between 11 o'clock and 2 o'clock, just depending on my schedule. And it is breakfast food, but that's just because that's what I like. I like breakfast foods. So it's eggs, usually almost always eggs, occasionally another protein like bacon and whatnot, but not that often. Mostly it's just eggs. I'll sit there and get some butter, fry up 5 eggs, or I'll get some butter and I'll scramble up, half a dozen eggs. Occasionally I'll put some, something on it. Like maybe I'll do some, spinach and, feta.
Sure.
I may put some ham in there and, cheese. I may do steak if I like a leftover steak from the night before. Believe it or not, sometimes I have leftover steak. But I'll mix it up, make an omelet, do things like that. So, but it's usually 5 to 6 eggs any given morning. Afternoon. Usually, like I said, between 11 and 2. It just depends on my work schedule. And I do fine. I'm able to perform. I was, when I was going for super strength, when I was getting ready for the Spartan, I didn't have time to eat breakfast in the morning before I trained, and I didn't really want to. And so I would go to my training fasted. And the only area where I think keto or fasting is a problem is just energy output.
Right.
When I was doing deadlifts, heavy deadlifts, I was winded. He wanted to code a 2-minute hold, break, rest period in between sets. And we kicked it up to 3 because I just couldn't do another heavy set like that with, I couldn't breathe. I was like, I just couldn't catch my wind because it was that much energy output. And so again, you may have to change up your training. You may have to look at your timing of your food based on the performance. So if I were trying to do something with like endurance, and I get up in the morning and maybe because I'm fasted, my glucose levels, blood glucose and all that is not high enough, and I can't get enough out of liver and muscle glycogen. Maybe that's a bit depleted. I might not be able to perform a long run without having some nutrition before I go.
For sure.
I'm not going to be carrying those goos around for sure. But,
right.
So you just want to look at your performance. If you're performing well and you're recovering and all that, then it could work. And it's quite convenient to not be thinking about food all the time. Right. And I tell the story. I was clearing my land. It's I bought 7 acres and I was out there clearing the land. and I was starving. I mean, I wasn't starving at all. I mean, I didn't eat anything for breakfast, and I thought I was going to be out there for like 2 or 3 hours, and then I'd come home, and my truck got stuck. Now it's kind of embarrassing to call AAA when your truck is stuck in your own front yard,
Yeah.
but there we are. And so I get them to come out. They're going to try to tow me, and their truck breaks.
Oh gosh.
So now they've got to call for someone else, get a part out there, fix their truck, and then get me out of there. So I just went fishing. That was part of the reason why I owned that property in the first place, was there was a fishing pond on it. So I'm out there just fishing, not for food, just fishing. And so they finish up. I'm driving home, and it's 6 o'clock in the evening, and I didn't eat the whole day. But I never thought about food. I didn't even think about food. And I could have walked there was a dollar store, I think 2 or 3 miles away. I could have walked over there if I was, I needed something. It wouldn't have been the healthiest choice, but I could walk to where there was at least somewhere I could buy something to eat. But the thought never even occurred to me. And I'm driving back home, and I'm like, I haven't had any food since about this time yesterday, and I didn't even think about it. So it can become a natural, and it's nice to not feel super, super hungry when you've skipped meals, and you end up in the middle of the day and you're like, there's nowhere convenient to go, or there are places that are convenient to go, but not serving the kind of food that you really want to eat. So it can be. You just have to see how you tolerate it and how it affects your training and everything else.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking too. If it fits in your lifestyle, like you, I wasn't a very big breakfast eater. And when I would go out for a run in the morning, I got to be really careful with what's in my belly. If it doesn't agree with me, my run's cut short. So I'm sacrificing the quality of my run.
Run through it, Pukey. Run through it.
I know. Yep, got to rally. But nowadays I'm focused on protein, like we had talked about before. I need to get a lot of extra protein in, and so I can't. If I'm hungry, I eat. If I'm not hungry, I can wait. But I do need to focus on protein. So it really does. Intermittent fasting can be really good if it fits in your lifestyle and your performance in the gym or on the run or whatever it is. That's for sure.
Yeah. Okay. And so Steve also had a question. He called it restrictive eating window. So I usually just say intermittent fasting, but they're the same concept. So what happens with Steve is when Steve wakes up in the morning, he doesn't really want breakfast. There's some mornings he does, and if he does, he eats. If his body is saying it doesn't need it, he goes on with his day.
Sure.
And then he goes to work. Now he'll work until 4 o'clock. So he gets up early and then he goes to work. He won't eat at work. And so he won't eat. His window is like 4 p.m. to 9 p.m.
Wow.
It's a pretty tight window there.
Yeah.
Now he eats whole food, but his concern was whether he was getting enough protein. He doesn't want to weigh and measure everything. He just wants to know that he's getting enough. And then if he's not, should he be taking a protein supplement or drink? So the short answer I have is this, is a lot of people do misunderstand what intermittent fasting is all about. It's not about eating less. It's really just about maintaining your metabolism in a way that your body can use both fat and glucose for energy. So it's helping regulate your insulin levels. And so that's the benefit of intermittent fasting or restricted eating windows, is you don't constantly have food in your stomach, so there's not this surge of sugar all the time. If you're eating mostly whole food, you should be getting enough nutrition if you're eating enough food during that window. And so typically the answer would be no, you're probably fine. The easiest way that I could say this, though, is just because you're only having 1 or 2 meals in an eating window, those don't need to be normal meals. They need to be a little bit bigger, particularly when we're talking about protein and other nutrition. And so, if we're going to talk about a serving of protein, most servings of protein are going to put you somewhere between 25 to 30 grams of protein. So a steak is about 4 ounces. Okay. So when you start looking at that, okay, what does that mean? Well, that steak is probably about the size of your palm, just not the fingers, but just the palm. If that's steak, if it's chicken, it's probably about the size of your hand. Okay. So if I were going to be doing restricted eating, I would want at least 2 servings of protein with my first meal and 2 servings of protein with my second meal, or 1 and 3, however you want to do that. If you want a smaller meal at 4 and then you're going to have a later meal, I would be aiming to get your good 4 servings of protein per day. If you're doing basic stuff, if you're lifting heavy, you're going to need more than that.
True.
Okay. Now, he's not doing this for weight loss because normally I would say don't drink calories. If you're trying to lose weight, don't drink calories. I know it's easy. You're like, well, I'm getting what I need. Yes, but your body doesn't have to digest that stuff. So you got berries and fruit and stuff in there. Usually something it's going to surge your blood sugar if it's got carbohydrates in it. And so, and it's going to go straight in. So you're not getting the benefits that protein usually satiates you a little bit better. But if it's processed, that's not the case for the most part. So I would avoid it if you can get the protein without it. Fish, eggs, meat, chicken, turkey, pork. I love those things. I love all of them. And so for me to sit down and have 3 servings of protein, no problem. Give me a 12-ounce steak. In fact, you see this filet? This is going to be my dinner.
Nice.
Yeah. I made a chili the day that Tammy left, and I've been eating off of that too. So that was 5 pounds of hamburger meat, made a big bowl, big batch of chili. And I've been eating on that. So, while I'm not, I have good breakfast, and then I have a lunch, and then I have a dinner. So I'm not in restricted eating windows or intermittent fasting at this point, but I'm making sure I'm getting 4 or 5 good servings of protein each and every day. So I would avoid drinking it if you can, because it's processed, and see if you can't just go ahead and up your protein by eating a little bit more meat. Just a little breast of chicken, basically you want I think it's like 5 ounces of chicken is a serving, and that's going to do you pretty good. And it's not, I don't find chicken breast all that filling, and it's typically lower in fat than most other meats. So just having that in there with your meal, with your breakfast, with your dinner, or whatever. And then of course, eggs. I love eggs. So I'll eat eggs for any meal. I don't care. So just recognize that you do have to make sure that you're eating enough, and all the other nutrients as well. So are you getting the vitamins and the minerals and all the other things that you need? Are you getting enough iron? Are you getting your vitamin D? It's probably the one supplement I'd say you definitely should consider during this time of the year, because if you're not getting enough sunshine, if you're not out and you're working and not getting out, then you might need a supplement in some case. So I'm not against supplementation. I'm just have another meal if you need to get protein and other nutrients you need.
Yeah, I just want to highlight here just what you said, Alan, that whether you're intermittent fasting or having a restricted time window of eating, the quality of what you're eating becomes super important. This isn't a time where, you've got a 5-hour eating window that you can eat anything that's in the house. You don't want to fill up on the junk food. It's not about calories. It's about the quality of your meals and just making sure you're getting the entire list of nutrients that your body needs in that window. So yeah, it's time to pay attention.
Yeah. Okay. Now the next question comes from John, and John is interested in the importance of maintaining and gaining athletic power as we age. Okay. This can be very important. I'm working with a client right now, and she was avid tennis player until she had an injury that got her off the court, and she wants to get back to playing. Tennis is a power sport. If you're going to be good at it, it's power. And that's one of the things she said. She played with this 80-year-old woman who, even though she couldn't move around the court that well, she could hit the ball with some force.
Nice.
And so this, my clients, like, that's what I want. I want to be that woman when I'm 80. I want to be able to hit the tennis ball with force. But there are other times that you're going to probably want some power. So if you're going to take a step out onto the street and you see a car coming, you're going to want to be able to jump backwards onto the sidewalk to avoid getting hit, or a bicycle or whatever. So having some power and capacity to move can be very important as we get older. A lot of people slow down, and so their movements are strong. They can be strong, but they don't really have power. So let me break that down a little bit so you understand what the difference is between power and strength. Okay. Strength is your capacity to move something heavy a distance. Power is your ability to move something heavy a distance faster.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So if you watch, if you could take a very strong person and hand them a baseball bat, and they might not be able to hit a home run because the bat speed isn't fast enough to put the power onto the ball. Whereas someone who knows how to use the baseball bat can put a lot of power, even if they're not as strong as the other individual. So strength is important when you need to lift something heavy, like, you want to pick up a couch, but power is when you want to be able to flip a couch. You want to be, you want to be able to move something quickly. And with that, so there's needs for both, particularly if you enjoy a sport. You're going to want some power to be able to perform that sport well. And that can be trained. And that's the other side about it. If you're training strength, sometimes you sacrifice power in training power. So they were looking at sprinters. And so sprinters are different than runners. Okay. It's a very different thing. Sprinters need power in their legs. They don't need endurance.
Right.
Because they're only going 40 meters, 50 meters, 100 meters. That's it. That's the sprint. So when they're training, one of the ways that you will train them for strength, for power, is for them to do a deadlift with, like they did it with hex bars. This is the one, one I saw, the science study I saw. And so the hex bar is basically, it's got bars around the side of it. So you stand in the middle. A lot of people like that for deadlifts because now you truly have the center of mass of the bar coming through your center of mass rather than slightly in front of it, as would work with a bar. So they would have the athlete lift the weight and then drop it.
Oh boy.
And so by not going down, they weren't building the strength. They weren't slowing their muscles down. The fast twitch, that up was right there. And so they were able to train that, and that increased their ability to jump higher. It can also increase their ability to sprint faster. Okay. But it's a particular type of training. So there is some training that you can do to build power. The only concern I'd have with training for power is that your form needs to be immaculate. So if you want to do power cleans and you want to do some of these other lifts like a clean and a jerk and all this, you've got to be very, very careful with it. Movement with weight, dynamic movement outside of the plane of just up and down or front and back can be very dangerous, particularly twisting motions. And so you could hurt yourself pretty badly if you're not careful trying to train for power. So it is something where I'd say if you were, like I don't coach deadlifts online. So if if you ever came to train with me, even though it's my favorite lift in the whole world, I won't code it. Now we might do something with a dumbbell that's similar, but that's about as close as it gets. We're not going to do deadlifts online. So if you're going to train for power, that's where I think getting a local person to train you is valuable because they can be watching your form. They can be making sure you do it right. A lot of times people will get these videos where they're trying to combine the strength training with speed, with moving. So like it's cardio strength training. I hate that. And I hate that because we end up with weight and dynamics.
Yeah.
And that's a recipe for injuries, particularly for people over the age of 40 and 50. So I don't like to coach that way. If I were going to do that, I would want to be in a class with an instructor that knew exactly what they were doing and could see the form problems and help you right there on the spot. So
that's a good plan.
It is important to train, but just make sure you're doing it right because as we age, that becomes, injuries are worst thing you can do. So
yeah.
Thou shalt not injure thyself. That's the first commandment. That's the first commandment of training. Thou shalt not hurt themselves. And so just make sure that you have the support you need and that you do it right.
That's a good plan. Yeah, it's just one of those things that's kind of last in the progression of things to do. And it's certainly good to have in your training, but as long as you're being worked with a trainer to make sure you stay safe, that's a good plan.
Now, one of the things you could do if you want to work, particularly power in your legs, would be jumping, plyometrics. So bounding, jumping on a box and stepping back down, those types of things can help you maintain power, build power in your legs. Case example is Tony Horton. You know, I've had him on the podcast twice, and that's one of his training protocols is the box jumping. And he does not have his leg. He's in his 60s at this point. You look at his legs and you'd swear they're 30-year-old legs because he's always doing those types of things, but he's maintained that and never lost that. So that's a fundamental difference, but he trains for power all the time and it shows. So
that's awesome.
You can train for it. Just be careful. You do.
For sure.
Okay. The next one is Kristen. And Kristen's question is, how do you figure out what your ideal weight is?
Oh boy.
Okay.
Now, that's a good question.
Well, it is. It's a great question. So here's the fundamental answer. The formula for BMI, which is calculating your height and your weight, can be terrible and it can be perfect. Most of us are not big muscle bound people walking around with all this excess muscle. So every bodybuilder has an obese BMI. You know, when I was at my most muscular, even in the pictures you see you can practically see my six pack, I was obese by the definition of BMI. So if you have excess muscle, BMI is not a good gauge. If you don't, BMI is probably a pretty clear indicator of where you should be. So for most people, the ideal body weight is going to be the one that gives you the ideal BMI, which is a BMI below 24. Okay. Another way of looking at this is body fat percentage. Now, body fat percentage can be measured very, very accurately with a DEXA scan, but it cannot be necessarily measured very well with the scale. So you have those electrical impedance on the scales, and it's going to tell you your body fat percentage, or at least an approximation, based on how the current traveled through your body. These can be off wildly. So when my body fat percentage was 19, the scale was telling me it was 47. Because it was taking my weight, and I don't know about the electrics, but my weight relative to my height that it had inside, it was showing that I had 47% body fat, but it did not because I had the excess muscle, but the electric impedance wasn't picking me up quite right. And they never really have. So if you want to go get a DEXA scan, you'll get a very clear picture of how much body fat you're carrying. For most women, you're going to want to be below somewhere probably between 20 and 30, maybe up to 30. Okay. And you're fine. For men, you want to be somewhere between 15 and 20 or 25. Okay. That's probably ideal. So from an ideal weight perspective, that's one key metric. The other metric is that your waist should be smaller than your chest.
Right.
You know, where you carry your body fat should be smaller than your chest. So for most men, they carry their body fat in their stomach. After menopause, many women start to carry their weight there. Men want to keep that waist size well below 40. If it gets over 40, you're obese. You just are. So part of it's going to be the way you look and feel. But yes, you can measure your body fat with a DEXA scan, probably give you the best indication of how much body fat as a percentage of your total weight. There are people who are big boned. Okay. You know, like I'm big boned. I'm like, well, go get a DEXA scan and let's see how big those bones are. That's typically not why they're overweight. They're overweight because their lifestyle has allowed them to accumulate fat mass. And it's not that they're big bone. They've just always lived a lifestyle that's caused them to weigh more. That can be fixed through nutrition and movement and sleep and stress management and a lot of other things. But we can change our lifestyle and we can lose the weight. But you want to get down to a point where you're wearing regular clothes that you can just walk into a store and buy.
Sure.
Okay. I had these shirts I liked that I bought in the UK. I love these shirts when I was working, and I couldn't find, they didn't fit me. My neck was an 18 and my arms were not 37, but that was the portions. If I wanted an 18-inch neck, the sleeves had to be 37. Well, my sleeves need to be 35 and my neck needed to be 18 and a half. So I couldn't buy these shirts. I couldn't wear these shirts without the little expander thing. When I was over heavy, I've always generally had a pretty thick neck. Even when I'm thin, my neck's bigger, beefier. It was like a linebacker kind of thing. And so that's just the thing as you go through this, is realize you can look at yourself and have a general idea. You can weigh yourself, but again, BMI aside is only a indicator that you're in the right range. If you don't have excess muscle, DEXA scan is probably the best way to know that you're close to where you need to be from a body fat percentage.
I think that's a good answer, Alan. I think BMI is important. We talked about the waist hip ratio. We are all built different with different muscle density as well as bone density. Sure, those are all going to have impacts on what the scale says. And I don't want to open a can of worms because we have other questions to get through here, but weight is just one aspect of your overall health. So I'm just going to suggest you stay in touch with your doctor, get your annual physical, make sure your blood cholesterol and glucose and all the other things that they measure are just as healthy, because there's a big picture here and weight is just one tiny metric. So I'll just leave that there.
and it actually is one that you don't have direct control over.
Yeah.
You can't wish the weight off, and you can't. And just weighing less doesn't mean better, because I could cut 30 to 50 pounds off of a person in 10 minutes. Just give me a saw and let me cut off one of your legs.
That sounds like a horror movie, but
because
yes.
you're still going to be the same height.
Yes. Yeah.
You'll weigh 30 to 40 pounds, 60 pounds less.
Yeah.
Ideal, right? No, not ideal. Okay.
Right.
So you have control over lifestyle. You do not have control over weight. Just like you didn't have control over height, because a lot of people joke. It's like when their BMI is off, it's like if I was just a foot taller, I'd be ideal.
Right. If only I just could add a few more inches
just a few
to
more
my
inches
height.
Help me. Yeah. But we can't do that. So, just realize what you can control is your lifestyle.
Yes.
So living a healthier lifestyle is going to help you get to your body's ideal weight.
100%.
Okay. So the next one is Suzette. And so Suzette wanted to get in ketosis, and so she was just had the question. It's pretty basic: is it just about keeping the macros, or do you have to eliminate certain foods entirely? And the answer is it's both. Okay, I've known people who've done keto as dirty as you can get, meaning they were eating, everything they were eating was still processed. It still fit the macros for keto. And so that's how they were eating. And they were in fact able to get into ketosis. Okay. And I know a little bit about Suzette. What she was really wondering is if she could have some apple or some pear, because she loves those, loves. And so I'm like, yeah, have some apple. But just recognize that everybody's response to a food is a little bit different. There was a study out of Israel where they had people wearing continuous glucose monitors and documenting what they ate when they ate. So the scientists could then compare the blood sugar response to the actual timing of the food and what they ate. And they found huge disparity between different people. Like just eating a banana, what a banana does to one person is very different to how it might work in another person. So there is a biology uniqueness that you have based on you. And so, for the most part, it really is just about the macros overall. But here's what we lose in that. If we're doing the dirty stuff, like all these processed stuff, all the foods that are marked keto, we might get into ketosis, but our body might not lose weight the way we want it to.
Right.
Okay. Because there might be some chemicals or other things going on in the body that are not working to your favor. We had Dr. Lonke on not long ago, and he was talking about obesogens and things like that could be in our food. Processed foods have all kinds of things in them that we don't really need to be eating. Okay. The plastics that they're wrapped in, the things that they're in, we probably don't need exposure to those. And so I would focus on the macros, but I would do that with whole food. I believe the keto diet, when it's a whole food diet, can be the best weight loss diet you can be on.
For
Okay.
sure.
Worked very well for me. I was an accidental keto guy, only because I was just eating meat, eggs, and a little bit of vegetables. Broccoli or broccoli, or I was eating some sauerkraut. I was eating leafy greens, asparagus, Brussels sprouts. We don't have Brussels sprouts here. I hope my wife buys some. She's supposed to be bringing some back. I got to send her a reminder.
Yeah,
Don't forget the Brussels sprouts. But that's what I eat: meat and vegetables. Okay, and by that being my primary way of eating, I'm getting all the nutrients my body needs, and my macros naturally fall into a low carb way of eating. And so, yes, you can have some, but you just have to gauge how your body responds. The easiest way to do that is to measure your blood sugar or measure your ketones. I recommend blood sugar because the little things are cheaper. So before you eat the apple, or half an apple, or quarter of an apple, or whatever you're going to do, take your blood sugar measure, eat the apple, wait 45 minutes, and measure your blood sugar again. And that's going to tell you whether you've increased your blood sugar. If you increase your blood sugar, very likely you're going to slow down or stop ketone production. So you may fall out of ketosis for a bit. It's not dangerous. It's not terrible. It's not stopping you from losing weight to go out of ketosis periodically. Okay. You have that in the evening, you go to sleep, you wake up in the morning, you're probably back in ketosis again. So to me, that's the core. I would either eat it in the evening, because having some carbs in the evening when I was in keto would help me sleep a little better. But I also, if you go out there and did a run or did your exercise, having a half of an apple after exercise, all you're doing is replacing the glycogen in the muscle and liver, and you're probably fine. You probably won't even drop out of ketosis at that moment, because your blood sugar won't actually spike, because there's a place for insulin to put it. It's just waiting on it, muscles and liver. So that's kind of the core of it, is just experiment. I usually recommend, when someone's first trying to get into ketosis, don't experiment. Just go down below 25 grams. Stay there for a few weeks. Get yourself into good ketosis. And then now you can start playing with what your carb threshold is, and you can try those other foods. But core of it, just like when we talked about intermittent fasting, make sure you're getting adequate nutrition for your body.
That's kind of what I was going to suggest again, Alan. Like we were talking about earlier, this might be a good time to pick up a keto-based cookbook or download some recipes off the internet, so that you know what kind of suits this style of eating, and then see how your body responds. And like you had mentioned, and we had discussed prior, is that there could be a very large range of carbohydrate tolerance between you and me, being a man and a woman, versus a runner and a lifter. I mean, there's just so many variables, and it's just something that you need to experiment with over time and see how that works within your lifestyle. But,
well, I've had Maria Emmerich on a few times, and she does the best keto cookbooks out there.
Awesome.
The thing I would say is most of those types of recipes, though, when they're trying, she's basically mimicking everyday foods. So she has a comfort foods one. I think she has a restaurants one. They're great. But that shouldn't be your staples. Okay. We shouldn't be trying to eat bad foods that are just made to hit a macro set. And that's what it is. Like if you wanted etouffee, the recipe she has in her cookbook, Comfort Foods, is the bomb. But that shouldn't be the goal. That's just okay, I want to be able to cook for my family, have a nice meal, and us, and enjoy something I used to enjoy without blowing my keto. And so that's the way I would approach it. I wouldn't go at it and say, okay, I have to find foods that I miss, because you can do fathead pizza, you can do all these other things and have all those foods, but if you're not changing your overall behavior and seeing just meat and vegetables as the actual food, because almond flour, coconut flour, they're processed stuff. So yeah, you can make a cookie that tastes like a cookie, but again, it's not serving you because it's not providing the nutrition your body really needs.
Absolutely. Still a priority to have the quality.
Yeah. But if you are going to get a cookbook, I would recommend Maria's, because they are excellent for those times when you say, okay, I don't know, I'm going to go do this potluck and I want to take something that everybody's going to enjoy.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
And then you can, and it still be your thing. So, there you go.
There you go.
And now the last question is from Swami, and he is just really frustrated with the fact that the more research and reading he does and listening he does, the more diametrically opposing viewpoints he hears. And he says mostly nutrition. And he's absolutely right. I've interviewed hundreds and hundreds of people on nutrition for the podcast, and he's absolutely right. People get locked into a mind frame, and that's their view. And it's really hard for many of them to ever leave that mind view. So I interviewed a guy. I don't remember his name right now because even though his diet was groundbreaking. So in this subtitle, it said groundbreaking way of eating. Now, as I read the book, it was the vegan diet, which has been around for thousands and thousands of years. Right. I said, so what is, so this is basically, isn't this just the vegan diet? He said, no, this is new. This is groundbreaking. I'm like, okay, whatever. But there's a brand there. There's a space. And one of the interesting things that happen in the book publishing, speaking circuit, whatever you want to call it, these folks become friends with each other. Right. And they travel around and do the circuits. So someone's writing a book, someone's a speaker, they're going around and they're at the same things. There's whole conferences that are built up around ways of eating. There are vegan conferences and there are keto conferences. And so I've gone and spoke at some of the, what the keto ones, particularly Keto Fest, when they were doing those, the two keto dudes, they started Keto Fest. And I went up there and I was the trainer at one, and then I went to the next one. I was a trainer and I also was a speaker. And so, you go up there and it's the same people. They're all traveling around doing these different conferences together. And so they connect. It's blasphemy for them to say anything that goes against that. And so I interviewed a woman, and her thoughts were that, basically you shouldn't stay in keto all the time. Keto is great, but you should come in and out of it regularly. And no one wanted her on the keto circuit for that book. Because again, she was going against the credo. Right. And I'm like, okay. I kind of started going against the credo when I was saying seasonal ketosis is a way to consider it for balance in your life and what you do. I've since learned that some people can't do seasonal ketosis. If they don't find a generally low carb way of eating, they're going to gain the weight back. So they can't take breaks and back and forth. And that's a shame, but that's where they are right now. So what's basically happening is someone will have a viewpoint, and then we have a thing called cognitive bias, meaning we want to be right.
Right.
We will ignore anything that tells us we're wrong and try to find flaws in it. Okay. Case in point, the Ornish study is one of the most widely referenced studies for anyone that's vegan. Now, the Ornish study, what he did was he wanted people to go on a vegan diet, start exercising, and stop smoking. And their health improved. Conclusion, the vegan diet's the healthiest way to eat.
Right.
Okay. All the studies you hear from the Seventh Adventists in California. Okay. Well, their belief system is that you take care of your body and you treat it like a palace, and that includes a vegan or vegetarian diet. So when they try to find people in their community that don't eat that way for the study, well, those people are generally probably breaking all of their other rules too. They're probably drinking alcohol. They're probably smoking. They're probably not exercising as much. So when you're comparing those two populations, of course, the people who are a little bit more stringent on their vegetarian vegan diet within that group of people are going to be healthier overall because they're doing the other lifestyle things. The 7 country study that was done by, crap, I'm drawing a blank on his name. Anyway, when he first pulled the data, he pulled it on 23 different countries.
Oh.
Oh. And he only included the data from the 7 that best fit his paradigm. Mm-hmm. And he did the study during Lent when most Europeans don't eat as much meat.
Right.
So you see, they can fashion their studies, they can put their stuff together, they can present their ideas. And in general, they're not wrong. Mm-hmm. They're just not complete. Mm-hmm. Okay. So I've asked the question many different ways to just about everybody, from carnivore to vegan to we had a raw paleo. We had raw eggs. I even tried that for a little while. It's okay.
Oh no.
All right, I didn't die. So safe experiment was fine. But there are different ways of eating. Mm-hmm. But where every one of them agrees is on one thing: whole food. Mm-hmm. So if they're a vegan, we're a plant-based, solely plant-based whole food diet. Those guys over there eating meat are eating junk. Mm-hmm. Okay. A vegan will not admit that there might be a difference between a grass-fed, grass-finished cow and a regular commercial cow. Oh. They will not admit that the health of the animal matters. At all. Mm-hmm. Okay. We know that the fat output of an animal is related to what it eats. So omega-3s and omega-6s are balanced in a cow that's grass-fed, grass-finished. Okay. Now, Dr. Greger, to his credit, has probably been one of the few people that I have a ton of respect for, because he does dive into the science. And over the years, he has softened. Mm-hmm. He was very hardcore vegan when he wrote How Not to Die. And by the time he wrote his last book, How Not to Age, he was understanding that there's, maybe a little bit of room for a little bit of meat, maybe. Oh. Got that far. That's huge. But I mean, so he's the nicest guy in the world to talk to. And he writes really great books, but he's on one side. Okay. In his book, How Not to Die, there was a fat that he said, the fatty acid that is in red meat that you don't want to eat. But the missing point was that for grass-fed, grass-finished cows, there's not that much of it in there. Mm-hmm. It's primarily this fatty acid that he was talking about is primarily in commercial beef. Okay. So they don't want to go all the way over and say, let's make a study that actually looks at this holistically with no bias whatsoever. Everybody goes into it with some level of bias.
Oh, yeah.
And just even in the way that they would set up the study itself is intended somewhat to prove their point. Mm-hmm. They can't help it. The only way you could run a valid study would be to take a carnivore, omnivore, vegetarian, and a vegan and make them put together the criteria for a study. But the problem they're going to run into is ethics. And what I mean by ethics in studies is we can't make someone eat a certain way if we believe it's harmful.
Oh, right.
So a vegan is never going to ask someone to eat meat because they would feel that's unethical.
Sure.
So they want to study other evidence that's come out, like what happens, but then it's almost impossible to break out and say, well, is this because they were a smoker or is this because they ate beef? Mm-hmm. Okay. We can study some other things in animals, and it's a little less ethical to feed. Like they fed rabbits cholesterol foods. Well, rabbits they don't eat meat. So when you're giving them a kibble that basically is like animal-based kibble, of course they're going to get sick.
Mm-hmm. That's a good point.
And it's to say that people get sick because rabbits get sick. Again, it's really, really hard to put together these studies. And do it in a way that's not going to have that bias built in. Mm-hmm. So that said, my accumulated knowledge in this, and again, I'm not a nutritionist, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a scientist. I just read a lot of books and I talk to a lot of people. If you're eating high quality food, real food, that is alive and it's as close to being alive as possible, So a fish you caught today in clean water is going to be better for you than the tilapia that they grew in a pond somewhere and had to paint pink so it would look like salmon, all that stuff. So just realize the closer it is of food to you and you know it's alive. So if you walk out in your yard and pick something that you planted and nurtured and took care of without pesticides, without all the fertilizers and stuff, that's going to be better for you than something else. If it comes in a box, bag, jar, or can, most of the time, I would just avoid eating it. There are a few exceptions. Tuna in a can and chicken in a can, salmon in a can can be okay occasionally. Frozen berries and vegetables can be awesome because many times those were raised all the way up to ripeness, picked and flash frozen right there. So they can be pretty good options for convenience and having what you need, particularly in months when local produce isn't there. But the closer it is to what you'd recognize as real food, the better. This is a piece of chicken. I see it come off the chicken. Okay. I watched them like in the grocery store here when we were in COVID. I could sit on my patio. I watched them carry a half a cow in there.
Oh boy.
And then I'd go in that afternoon and buy some hamburger meat that I know came off of the cow carcass they carried into the store that morning. That's pretty fresh, pretty close to the animal.
Sure.
And so go to the farmer's market, get to know the people there. If they're feeding it to their family, then they feel pretty confident that it's done right. You can ask them how they raise their animals. You can talk to them about their garden and their rotation and how they're managing the soil. Most of them will offer to let you come to their farm and do a tour. They're so excited about teaching people about food and where it comes from. So get your kids, get in a car, go to the farmer's market, talk to them, learn something, go to their farm, see their chickens just walking around. Free range chicken. This is what free range chicken versus the definition of what a business can get, a big conglomerate can get away with calling something a free range chicken. If a chicken has an opportunity to get outside, it's considered free range.
Right.
Not that it ever did. But if there was a door and it could have gone out that door, they consider that a free range animal.
Crazy.
Okay. That's what it is. Now, because chickens are kind of like little raptors, they peck on each other. They fight. Okay. Each other sometimes. So to keep the chickens from getting sick, they shoot them up with antibiotics just as a normal course of business, just to keep them alive long enough to be able to farm them. And then in some cases, they cut off their beaks so they can't peck each other. So there are healthy animals, there's healthy plants, there's rotation, there's all the things that are necessary to have sustainable produce and meat and all those things. And so if you know that that's what's happening, you're feeding yourself good nutrition. Yeah. If you choose to exclude a food type because either you don't like it, like my wife doesn't really like fish. She likes sushi. She doesn't like fish. So she occasionally she will eat some salmon, but generally she doesn't, and tuna, but she doesn't generally like fish. So she doesn't eat a lot of fish. So if there's a food you don't like, don't feel like you have to eat it. You can get the nutrition from something else. If you have some ethical reasons for saying, I don't want to eat certain things. I had one relative, I was dating a girl and her sister was like, I won't eat anything with a face.
Sure.
I'm like, okay, well, if I paint a face on a pumpkin, you're not going to eat it? Probably not. But that was her thing. She wasn't going to eat anything that had a face. I'm like, okay, that's a big exclusion. So we've got to fix something because you're not going to get certain nutrients. So if you know what your nutrients needs are and you're focused on real food, you're going to be fine. Everybody else is going to diametrically cut this off, have their little piece, and then they're going to go speak on it. They're going to write on it. And that's their thing. Just realize that's also how they're getting paid.
Sure.
They're making friends with other people like them, and that's who they're writing for. And that's fine. That's just the way it's going to be. And we can't get food science fixed, and you've got runners that are basically have almost no upper body musculature. because that improves their ability to run. They're not carrying extra weight they don't need. And you have people who are much more muscular, and both are saying, oh, this is the way you should go. Cardiovascular health is what's going to keep you alive for the rest of your life. Okay. And so is strength and muscles. I just, again, I want to be able to open my own pickle jar. So the reason I want to have a little bit more muscle is grip strength. And I can find a study that will tell you grip strength will help in mortality. The lower your grip strength, the more likely you're to die of all causes.
Oh, gosh.
All causes. But does grip strength kill you? Well, I guess if you're hanging off of something and you can't hold on, then maybe. But in a general sense, no. But it's a correlation. And so all these studies are going to say things. We can find a correlation for just about everything. For example, notice how there's always firefighters at a fire.
Right.
Okay.
It's kind of their job.
Right. So maybe firefighters are responsible for the fires. If we didn't have any firefighters, maybe we wouldn't have any fires. Okay. You see how silly that sounds?
Yeah.
But we can always find some form of correlation and put that in and say, okay, this is it. And then it gets worse because by the time it gets to a headline, then they've got to make it click. They got to get you hooked. So it says, fish kills, okay, how does fish kill? And so now you're going to read it and it's like, well, there's the mercury levels of, that come from this particular pond in Canada or whatever, in China. Yeah, I guess you could die from eating that fish.
Too much. Yeah.
Too much. So again, it's just one of those things where you can make science do anything you want it to do.
Well, there you have it. Yes.
And so that's why you're going to have this. And I could go on and on and on. I don't want to get political about it, but just realize there is a politics behind all of this.
There are lobbying, for sure.
Because if they can tell you that you shouldn't have certain foods, if they can, because they even did this when Michelle Obama was in office, they wanted to come up with the new food plate things. They didn't want, they wanted to get away from what was there, but they still wanted to be able to so they wanted to enforce it a little bit on the kids and school lunches and school breakfasts and all the things. And that's a lot of the reasons why the government wants to have school lunches and have school breakfast and all that is so that they can do these things, but they couldn't get to the number with the things the kids would eat. So they had to, so pizza got labeled as a vegetable.
Oh, that's right.
Okay.
I remember that.
That's the circle that they get into with this stuff, with the politics and all of it. It's that kind of mind thing. So just don't go down that mind tunnel because we're not getting out of it from a global perspective, a macro perspective. What you can take care of is the micro, which is you and your family.
That's it, Alan. I think the bottom line is that we are bombarded every day with what diet is best or what exercise is best, what everybody should be doing. But the fact of the matter is, if you line 20 of your best friends up in a row, you're going to have 20 different body situations: underweight, midweight, overweight, older, younger, athletic, sedentary. I mean, we are so different that it's just virtually impossible for there to be one diet, one workout regimen that makes everybody as healthy as they could possibly be. And so this is where it becomes super individualized. And like the listener that read that or sent in that question, it is super frustrating to be bombarded by all this data all the time. So stop it and then just pay attention to what you need in this time. And like I've said in our discussions over the years, Alan, is that what I did in my 20s as far as eating and working out is completely different to where I am today in my 50s and menopausal. We are all in different stages of health throughout our entire life. So even if you did choose a way of eating vegan or keto or whatever, even that's going to evolve with how your body is aging and how you're feeling, your energy outputs, your cholesterol levels, your blood glucose levels. I mean, you just have to be aware that you need to do what's right for your body at this moment in time. So I agree that he's frustrated. I get just as frustrated because it is annoying.
I get to read their books and have conversations with them.
But it's good to hear. And but you can listen to all this, you can read all this, but then you've got to say, well, is this right for me? Where am I right now in my life? And what will make me the healthiest, strongest, fit for task at this stage in life. So I wish it was easier. I totally empathize with your listener on this question because it can be very frustrating, but take the information with a grain of salt and then do what's right for you.
Yeah. So, I want to thank Phil, Steve, John, Kristen, Suzette, and Swami for your questions. This was a really good session, and I hope that the rest, anyone, if you have a question, please send it in, and we'll have another one of these next quarter. I'd like to make that a regular feature thing we do. So,
sure.
If you have some questions, please send them in. Love to get you the answer and then use it for the podcast. So. Thank you, everyone that did that. Thank you.
Yep.
All right. Well, Raz, I'll talk to you next week.
Great. Take care, Alan.
You too. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
If you enjoyed today's show, take a moment to subscribe so you don't miss the next one. And if you would, please leave us a rating and review on your podcast player of choice. Next time on the 40 Plus Fitness podcast, we discuss self-love and why it is critical for health and fitness lifestyle change. Until then, have a happy and healthy week.